What you're about to hear isn't a dry history lesson. It's a front row seat to one man's wild journey through fire, mud, chaos, and the dark humor of war. Company H, that's Company H, spelled like it sounds, is the raw, sharp-tongued, and unexpectedly funny memoir of Samuel R. Watkins, a Confederate soldier who marched, fought, and somehow survived some of the bloodiest battles in American history. Watkins didn't write like a politician or a general. He wrote like a soldier who had seen it all and still had something to say. His words are full of energy, irreverence, and grit. This isn't a romanticized story of glory. It's a boots-on-the-ground account of shattered illusions, brotherhood in the trenches, and the bizarre mix of horror and humor that comes with war. Whether he's describing the madness of battle, the boredom between skirmishes, or the sheer absurdity of army life, Watkins never holds back. If you're looking for a Civil War memoir that feels more like an uncensored campfire story than a classroom lecture, you're in the right place. If you enjoy this type of content, please like and subscribe. This is Sam Watkins' story. These are his words. Let's begin. To the memory of my fallen comrades from the Maury Grays and the 1st Tennessee Regiment who gave their lives defending Southern homes and freedoms, and to my surviving brothers in arms, nearly all of whom shed their blood for the same cause, this book is respectfully dedicated. About 20 years ago, I think it was, I won't be certain though, a man whose name, if I remember correctly, was William L. Yancey. I write only from memory, and this was a long time ago, took a strange and peculiar notion that the sun rose in the east and set in the west, and that the compass pointed north and south. Now everybody knew, at the time, that it was just the idiosyncrasy of an unbalanced mind, and that the United States of America had no north, no south, no east, no west. Well, he began to preach the strange doctrine of there being such a thing. He began to have followers. As you know, it matters not how absurd, ridiculous, and preposterous doctrines may be, there will always be some followers. Well, one man by the name of, I think it was, Rhett, said it out loud. He was told to shh. Then another fellow by the name, I remember this one because it sounded like a graveyard, Toombs, said so, and he was told to she. Then, after a while, whole heaps of people began to say that they thought there was a north and a south. And after a while, hundreds and thousands and millions said that there was a south. But they were the persons who lived in the direction that the watercourses run. Now, the people who lived where the watercourses started from came down to see about it, and they said, "Gents, you are very much mistaken. We came over in the Mayflower, and we used to burn witches for saying that the sun rose in the east and set in the west, because the sun neither rises nor sets. The earth simply turns on its axis, and we know because we are Puritans." The spokesman of the party was named, I think I remember his name because it always gave me the blues when I heard it, Horace Greeley, and another person by the name of Charles Sumner said, "There ain't any north or south, east or west, and you shan't say so either." Now, the other people who lived in the direction that the watercourses run just raised their bristles and continued saying that there is a north and there is a south. When those at the head of the watercourses came out furiously mad to coerce those in the direction the watercourses run, and to make them take it back, well, they went to gouging and biting, to pulling and scratching at a furious rate. One side elected a captain by the name of Jeff Davis, known as One-Eyed Jeff, and a first lieutenant by the name of Alex Stevens, commonly styled Smart Alec. The other side selected as captain a son of Nancy Hanks of Bowling Green and a son of old Bob Lincoln, the rail splitter, whose name was Abe. Well, after he was elected captain, they elected as first lieutenant an individual of doubtful blood by the name of Hannibal Hamlin, being a descendant of the generation of Ham, the bad son of old Noah, who meant to curse him blue, but overdid the thing and cursed him black. Well, as I said before, they went to fighting, but old Abe's side got the best of the argument. But in getting the best of the argument, they called in all the people and wise men of other nations of the earth, and they too said that America had no cardinal points, and that the sun didn't rise in the east and set in the west, and that the compass did not point either north or south. Well then, Captain Jeff Davis's side gave it up and quit, and they too went to saying that there is no north, no south, no east, no west. Well, us boys all took a small part in the fracas, and Shep, the prophet, remarked that the day would come when those who once believed that the American continent had cardinal points would be ashamed to admit it. That day has arrived. America has no north, no south, no east, no west. The sun rises over the hills and sets over the mountains. The compass just points up and down, and we can laugh now at the absurd notion of there being a north and a south. Well, reader, let me whisper in your ear. I was in the row, and the following pages will tell what part I took in the little unpleasant misconception of there being such a thing as a north and south. The bloody chasm. In these memoirs, after the lapse of 20 years, we propose to fight our battles over again. To do this is but a pastime and pleasure, as there is nothing that so much delights the old soldier as to revisit the scenes and battlefields with which he was once so familiar, and to recall the incidents, though trifling they may have seemed at the time. The histories of the lost cause are all written out by big bugs, generals, and renowned historians, and like the fellow who called a turtle a cooter, being told that no such word as cooter was in Webster's dictionary, remarked that he had as much right to make a dictionary as Mr. Webster or any other man, so have I to write a history. But in these pages I do not pretend to write the history of the war. I only give a few sketches and incidents that came under the observation of a high private in the rear ranks of the rebel army. Of course, the histories are all correct. They tell of great achievements by great men who wear the laurels of victory, have grand presents given them, high positions in civil life, presidents of corporations, governors of states, official positions, etc. And when they die, long obituaries are published telling their many virtues and distinguished victories. And when they are buried, the whole country goes into mourning and is called upon to buy an elegant monument to erect over the remains of so distinguished and brave a general. But in the following pages, I propose to tell of the fellows who did the shooting and killing, the fortifying and ditching, the sweeping of the streets, the drilling, the standing guard, picket, and vidette, and who drew, or were to draw, $11 per month and rations, and also drew the ramrod and tore the cartridge. Pardon me, should I use the personal pronoun I too frequently, as I do not wish to be called egotistical, for I only write of what I saw as a humble private in the rear rank in an infantry regiment, commonly called Webfoot. Neither do I propose to make this a connected journal, for I write entirely from memory, and you must remember, kind reader, that these things happened 20 years ago, and 20 years is a long time in the life of any individual. I was 21 years old then, and at that time I was not married. Now I have a house full of young rebels clustering around my knees and bumping against my elbow while I write these reminiscences of the war, of secession, rebellion, state rights, slavery, or our rights in the territories, or by whatever other name it may be called. These are all with the past now, and the North and South have long ago shaken hands across the bloody chasm. The flag of the Southern cause has been furled, never to be again unfurled, gone like a dream of yesterday, and lives only in the memory of those who lived through those bloody days and times. 1861. Reader mine, did you live in that stormy period? In the year of our Lord 1861, do you remember those stirring times? Do you recollect that year for the first time in your life, hearing Dixie and the bonnie blue flag? Fort Sumter was fired upon from Charleston by troops under General Beauregard, and Major Anderson of the Federal Army surrendered. The die was cast. War was declared. Lincoln called for troops from Tennessee and all the southern states. But Tennessee, loyal to her southern sister states, passed the ordinance of secession and enlisted under the Stars and Bars. From that day on, almost every person was eager for the war, and we were all afraid it would be over before we had a chance to fight. Companies were formed, regiments organized. Left, left, left was heard from morning till night. By the right flank, file left, march, were familiar sounds. Everywhere could be seen Southern cockades made by the ladies and our sweethearts, and some who later became Union men made the most fiery secession speeches. Flags made by the ladies were presented to companies to hear the young orators tell of how they would protect that flag, how they would come back with the flag, or come not at all, and how, if they fell, they would fall with their backs to the field and their feet to the foe. Well, it would fairly make our hair stand on end with intense patriotism. We wanted to march right off and whip 20 Yankees, but we soon found out that the glory of war was at home among the ladies, and not upon the field of blood and carnage and death, where our comrades were mutilated and torn by shot and shell. To see the cheek blanch, to hear the fervent prayer, I might say the agony of mind, was very different indeed from the patriotic times at home. Camp Cheatham. After being drilled and disciplined at Camp Cheatham under the administrative ability of General R.C. Foster III for 2 months, we, the 1st, 3rd, and 11th Tennessee Regiments, Maney, Brown, and Rains, learned of the advance of McClellan's army into Virginia toward Harper's Ferry and Bull Run. The Federal Army was advancing all along the line. They expected to march right into the heart of the South, set the enslaved people free, take our property, and whip the rebels back into the Union. But they soon found that secession was a bigger mouthful than they could swallow in one gulp. They found the people of the South were in earnest. Secession may have been wrong in the abstract, and it has since been tried and settled by the arbitrament of the sword and bayonet, but I am as firm in my convictions today of the right of secession as I was in 1861. The South is our country. The North is the country of those who live there. We are an agricultural people. They are a manufacturing people. They are the descendants of the good old Puritan Plymouth Rock stock, and we of the South come from the proud and aristocratic stock of Cavaliers. We believe in the doctrine of states' rights. They believe in the doctrine of centralization. John C. Calhoun, Patrick Henry, and Randolph of Roanoke saw the danger early and warned the North of the consequences but they laughed at them. We only fought for our state's rights. They fought for union and power. The South fell, battling under the banner of states' rights, but fell grand and glorious, even in defeat. Now, reader, please pardon the digression. That is, every word we will say in defense of secession in the following pages. The question was long ago settled, and it is buried forever, never in this age or generation to be resurrected. The vote of the regiment was taken, and we all voted to go to Virginia. The Southern Confederacy had established its capital at Richmond. A man by the name of Jackson, who kept a hotel in Maryland, had raised the stars and bars, and a Federal officer by the name of Ellsworth tore it down. Jackson then riddled his body with buckshot from a double-barreled shotgun. First blood for the South. Everywhere the enemy was advancing. The red clouds of war were rising across the land, but at this particular point, I refer you to the history books of the period. A private soldier is but an automaton, a machine that works by the command of a good, bad, or indifferent engineer, and is presumed to know nothing of all these great events. His business is to load and shoot, stand picket, act as vidette, and so on, while the officers sleep, or perhaps die on the field of battle and glory. And his obituary and epitaph? Just one remembered among the slain. To what company, regiment, brigade, or corps he belonged, there is no account. He is soon forgotten. A long line of boxcars was drawn up at Camp Cheatham one morning in July. The bugle sounded to strike tents and place everything on board the cars. We old comrades have gotten together and laughed 100 times at the plunder and property we had accumulated compared to our later, very meager wardrobe. Every soldier had enough blankets, shirts, pants, and old boots to last a year, and the empty bottles and jugs would have set up a first-class drugstore. In addition, every one of us had his gun, cartridge box, knapsack, and 3 days' rations, a pistol on each side, and a long bowie knife that had been presented to us by William Wood of Columbia, Tennessee. We climbed in and on top of the boxcars. The whistle sounded, and amid the waving of hats, handkerchiefs, and flags, we bid a long and final farewell to old Camp Cheatham. Upon arriving at Nashville, the citizens turned out in full force to receive us, and again we were reminded of the good old times and the girl we left behind. Ah, it was worth soldiering just to receive such a welcome. The Reverend Mr. Elliot invited us to his college grove, where enough of the good things of earth had been prepared to gratify the tastes of even the most fastidious epicure. What was most novel, we were waited on by the most beautiful young ladies, pupils of his school. It was charming, I tell you. Reverend C.D. Elliot was our brigade chaplain throughout the war, and Dr. C.T. Quintard was the chaplain of the 1st Tennessee Regiment, two of the finest men who ever lived. Quintard is now the Bishop of Tennessee. On the road. Leaving Nashville, we went bowling along at 20 or 30 miles an hour, as fast as steam could carry us. At every town and station, citizens and ladies waved their handkerchiefs and cheered for Jeff Davis and the Southern Confederacy. Magnificent banquets were prepared for us all along the route. It was one grand festival, from one end of the line to the other. At Chattanooga, Knoxville, Bristol, Farmville, Lynchburg, everywhere, we were greeted with the same demonstrations of joy and welcome. Ah, those were glorious times. And now, reader, you see why the old soldier loves to relive that happy period, but the Yankees were advancing on Manassas. July 21st found us 100 miles from that fierce day's battle. That night, after the battle was fought and won, our train pulled into Manassas Junction. Well, what's the news? Everyone was wild. No, frenzied with excitement over the victory. We felt very much like the boy the calf had run over. We believed the war was over and that we would have to return home without even seeing a Yankee soldier. Ah, how we envied those who were wounded. At that moment, we would have given $1,000 to have been in that battle and to have had our arm shot off, so we could return home with an empty sleeve. But the battle was over, and we had missed it. Staunton. From Manassas, our train moved on to Staunton, Virginia. Here, we again went into camp, overhauled kettles, pots, buckets, jugs, and tents, and found everything so tangled up and mixed that we could not tell one thing from another. We stretched our tents, and the soldiers once again felt that restraint and discipline which we had almost forgotten during the trip to this place. But as the war was over now, our captains, colonels, and generals were not too hard on the boys. In fact, they had begun to campaign a little for the legislature and for Congress. Some even wanted and were looking forward to the time when they could run for governor of Tennessee. Staunton was a big place. Whiskey was cheap, and good Virginia tobacco was plentiful, and the currency of the country was gold and silver. The state asylums for the blind and mentally ill were here, and we visited all the places of interest. Here is where we first saw the game called Chuck-a-Luck, which later became very popular in the Army. But I always noticed that Chuck won and Luck always lost. Faro and roulette were in full swing. In fact, the scum had begun to rise to the surface, and shoddy had become the gentleman. By this I mean that civil law had been suspended. The robes of the judges had been overridden by the sword and bayonet. In other words, the military had absorbed the civil, and so the gambler was in his glory. Warm Springs, Virginia. One day, while we were idling around camp, June Tucker sounded the assembly, and we were ordered aboard the cars. We pulled out for Millboro. From there, we had to walk on foot to Bath Alum and Warm Springs. We crossed the Allegheny Mountains. I was on every march that was ever made by the 1st Tennessee Regiment during the entire war, and even now I cannot remember a harder or more exhausting march than this one. It seemed as though mountain was piled upon mountain. No sooner would we reach what appeared to be the top than another view of a higher and still higher mountain would rise before us. From the base to the summit, soldiers lined the road, broken down and exhausted. First one blanket was thrown away, then another. Here and there were good pairs of pants, old boots and shoes, Sunday hats, pistols, and bowie knives strewn along the road. Old bottles, jugs, and various and sundry articles lay scattered everywhere. Up and up, onward and upward, we pulled and toiled until we reached the very top. Then there burst upon our view one of the grandest and most beautiful landscapes we had ever beheld. Nestled in the valley before us was Bath Alum and Warm Springs. It seemed to me then, and still does, a glimpse of a better and brighter world, like the weary Christian pilgrim, who, after many years of toil, finally sees his reward. A glad shout arose from those who had reached the summit, which cheered and encouraged the others to persevere. At last we arrived at Warm Springs. There, a nice warm dinner was waiting for us. They had a large bathhouse at Warm Springs, a big pool of water arranged so that a person could enter to any depth he desired. It was free, and we all jumped in. We had no idea of the weakening effect it would have on our bodies. As the water was only slightly warm, we stayed in for a long time, but when we came out, we were as limp as dish rags. About this time, the assembly sounded, and we were ordered to march. But we couldn't march worth a cent. We had to stay until our systems had sufficiently recovered. and we continued to wonder what all this marching was for, since the war was supposed to be over anyway. 2 days after leaving Warm Springs, we reached Big Springs. It was the month of August, and the biggest white frost I've ever seen, even in winter, covered the ground. The Yankees were reported to be close by, and Captain Field was sent ahead on a scouting mission with 10 men. I was one of the details. When we left camp that evening, it was dark, dreary, and drizzling rain. Eventually, the rain began to pour, and every one of us was soaked to the skin, guns, cartridges, and powder. The next morning, just at daylight, while standing vedette, I saw a group of 25 or 30 Yankees approaching. I raised my gun to shoot and took aim, but the cap just popped. They saw me and snapped 3 or 4 caps in return. Their powder was wet too. Before I could get a fresh cap on, Captain Field came running up with his 7-shot rifle, and with his first fire, he killed a Yankee. The rest broke and ran. Captain Field did all the shooting, but every time he aimed, he hit a Yankee. I've forgotten the exact number he killed, but if I'm not mistaken, it was either 20 or 21. I remember the incident was reported in nearly every Southern newspaper at the time, and the general comment was that one Southern man was equal to 20 Yankees. While we were in hot pursuit, one truly brave and noble Yankee who had been badly wounded said, "Gentlemen, you've killed me, but not 100 yards from here is the main line." We did not go any further, but halted right there. After getting all the information we could from the wounded Yankee, we returned to camp. One evening, General Robert E. Lee came to our camp. He was a fine-looking gentleman and wore a mustache. He was dressed in blue cottonade and looked like some good boy's grandfather. I felt like going up to him and saying, "Good evening, Uncle Bob." I'm not certain at this late date that I didn't actually do so. I remember getting up close and sitting there, listening to his conversation with the officers of our regiment. He had a calm and collected air about him. His voice was kind and gentle, and his eyes were soft like a dove's. His entire appearance, from form to features to manner, had a kind of gentle and soothing magnetism about it that drew everyone to him and made them love, respect, and honor him. I fell in love with the old gentleman and felt like going home with him. I know I have never seen a finer looking man, nor one with more kind and gentle features and manners. His horse was grazing nearby, and when I saw that he was getting ready to leave, I ran and caught his horse and led it up to him. He took the reins of the bridle in his hand and said, "Thank you, my son," then rode off, and my heart went with him. None of his staff were with him. He wore no sword or pistol or anything to show his rank. The only thing I remember seeing on him was an opera glass, hanging over his shoulder by a strap. Leaving Big Springs, we marched on, day by day, across the Greenbrier and Gauley rivers to Huntersville, a small but lively town hidden in the deep recesses of the mountains. The people in these mountains lived very well. They had plenty of honey and buckwheat cakes. They called buttermilk sour milk and thought it wasn't even fit for pigs. They couldn't see how anyone drank it, but sauerkraut was considered good. Everything seemed to grow in the mountains: potatoes, both Irish and sweet, onions, snap beans, peas, though the country was sparsely populated. Deer, bears, foxes, wild turkeys, rabbits, and squirrels were abundant. Apples and peaches were everywhere, and every household had apple butter on the table for every meal. Occasionally, we'd come across a small-sized distillery, which we would at once put to use. We drank the singlings while they were still hot. It was like the old woman who said she couldn't eat corn bread until she found out they made whiskey out of corn. Then she could manage to worry a little of it down. And so it was with us and the Singlings. From this point forward, we were always on the move. Tramp, tramp, tramp. Constantly marching. Lee's Corps, Stonewall Jackson's division. I refer you to the history books for details of the marches and campaigns made by these commanders in the first year of the war. Well, we followed them. That concludes the first part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment